Thank you, Debbie. It is really exciting for me to be able to be here today and participate in the dialogue of what is being said here today and contemplated, and I'm delighted to hear the comments, Senator Whipple. I appreciated so much what you said about decoupling the Railroad Commission. We also regulate natural gas, investor-owned utilities, and I think that's something that Texas, I hope we will be looking at to incentivize them. And Roger, I need your number because I want you to come around with me when I go on the speaking tour. For those of you who do not know, briefly, I'd just be curious to see a show of hands of who here is not from Texas. Okay. Well, then you didn't vote for me. But I hope you would have if you were here. I need to tell you that the Texas Railroad Commission is an elected body. We're one of the few regulatory agencies in the country regulating the energy industry that is elected by the people of Texas. There are three of us. We are an appellate court, if you will, or rather the Supreme Court of oil and gas. I guess we're the referees for the energy patch in Texas, if you will, and we do run on staggered terms. Our terms are 6 years. It's a very old historical agency in Texas. And I've got to tell you that it has absolutely nothing to do with railroads anymore. Only in this state would you have an agency called something that had nothing to do with its mission at all, and that is the Texas Railroad Commission. But yes, Debbie, it was, in fact, a Saudi Arabian graduate student here at UT, University of Texas in Austin, did his PhD, his doctorate on the Railroad Commission, which at the time was prorating the fields in Texas and determining how much could be produced, and as effectively setting the price worldwide of oil. So he went home, and some of his contemporaries back in Saudi Arabia decided that they could do the same thing, and that was how OPEC was formed after the template of what was being done at the Railroad Commission. Our mission has changed a lot since then, and now involves, of course, the environmental regulatory ideals of Texas as well, and we don't prorate fields anymore. Everything today is wide open flow because of the tremendous demand that is needed to run the engine of our country. But a little bit about the Railroad Commission, because it is such a unique agency, and I'm hoping I'll have time to take some questions after I have to dash out here to catch another airplane to go somewhere else. Thank goodness for Southwest Airlines, which we love in Texas. But this agency was established in 1891 to have jurisdictional oversight of railroads in a post-Civil War economy in Texas. To ensure what it originally regulated, I love this, railroads, terminals, wharves, and express companies. So everything that moved commodities across the state of Texas was under the jurisdiction of the Railroad Commission. Over the last century, our role has changed dramatically to include the oversight and management of the oil and gas industry. Among other ones, that includes the permitting of coal mines and the reclamation of coal mines in Texas. We permit all uranium test wells in this state, which Texas is very rich in uranium, and we oversee pipelines as well, intrastate pipelines, 160,000 miles. So all of the infrastructure of this that we are talking about today. And that's why I'm so excited, because I think this dialogue as we move forward, and for those of you who don't know about it, it's important to know where we've been so that we can figure out exactly how we're going to get where we're going, and not to make the mistakes of the past, but to build on the successes. Texas just had a small amount of production prior to 1901, and that was when a well was spudded called Spindletop. And that was when the age of oil production in Texas truly began. And one day, Spindletop doubled the United States production. That one well produced 100,000 barrels of oil a day. And from that day forward, the success of the energy industry in the past in Texas have been, as you can imagine, and everybody knows, linked. We at the Railroad Commission have oversight of 350,000 natural gas wells and oil wells combined at different stages of their life, starting from in the early 1900s until today, and there are many more that are about to be permitted and awaiting to be spudded as I speak. But in 1905, the oil production tax, which we call a severance tax, was first enacted in Texas. That was at a rate of 1% of the value of the commodity. Today, a severance tax of 4.6% on every MCF of natural gas and 7.5%, or rather 4.6% on the market value of a barrel of oil, and 7.5% on an MCF of gas is charged to that production, and it goes into the state's rainy day fund and funds a lot of the activities of our state government. We relied heavily on those energy taxes to fund the functions of government for a time, and some would argue too heavily, and that changed a lot in the mid-'80s. In 1981, the oil tax was responsible for 16.6% of our state's revenues, and then when the price of oil dropped in the 1980s, our Texas government faced a major, as you can imagine, economic crisis. We were overly reliant on oil revenues in this state, and we found ourselves in a deficit. The government, the Texas economy has greatly diversified since then and diversified its tax base, but keeping this energy revenue is still an important method of financing some functions of state government, but not nearly the percentage of what it used to be. Our state government depends on revenue from this energy production it goes into our permanent school fund, our rainy day fund, which in turn, I might add, I don't know who it was that suggested severance taxes funding alternatives, but it goes into a technology fund as well to look at advanced technologies, not just for alternative energy, but for marketing and other tools of commerce as well. But it is true what they say. It might be bragging to some of you, it may not, nothing to be proud of, but it's important to know where this resource has been coming from here until now, and Texas is the #1 producer of oil and the #1 producer of natural gas in the country, and that's why I'm a very busy person these days, as you can imagine. In Texas, we produce about 341 million barrels of oil a year. That's about 18% of our domestic production, probably the equivalent of Alaska. We sort of go back and forth with production in Alaska. But you're right, oil production here in Texas peaked in 1972 at 1.26 billion barrels produced in that 1 year. Since that time, we have seen a decline of roughly 3% a year, and that's probably an average. Some years have been greater, some smaller. But since 2003, there has been an arrest in that decline, and it's stayed stable. In 2006, stable, give or take, if you have a margin of error in our numbers, there was a decline of about 0.77% a year from the year before. And I think that everybody here knows what we can attribute that to, many different factors, but the one predominant one should not be underestimated, is the price of oil. It is amazing what technology is very, very expensive, and wells drilled that were not going to be economic 20 years today are today economic, and that is what is we can attribute a lot of this natural gas and oil production to, but natural gas is really what Texas is so rich in, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when you have a price of what we $24, a little over that in 2002, and now I think today the price of oil was $89 a barrel, you are going to create an incentive, if you will, to look for domestic reserves. And I am a big proponent of that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit while to get us through the years, if you will, our victory garden until we find yet another source of energy, just like we found oil in 1901. Natural gas is a very exciting story, and there are some comments I might take issue to regarding natural gas has peaked. We have tremendous potential reserves of natural gas, and also I might suggest that in fact as well, natural gas, compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas can be a viable source of fuel for vehicles. And there are fleets in California and fleets in Dallas that are run on compressed natural gas. So I don't want natural gas to get out of this discussion. I think it's a very viable source to fund vehicles in the years to come, as we look at all of the tools in the toolbox that I think we're going to need. But we produce about 30% of all the natural gas that is produced in the country. That's about 6 trillion cubic feet a year in Texas. But it did peak back in 1972 when we were producing 9.6 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. But just recently we're seeing an uptick again in natural gas production, and a lot of that is due to new technologies that are allowing producers to go where they were not able to go before. This, what's going on in Texas, and everybody ought to know, it's a unique situation that we are facing, and that is the production that's going on in the Barnett Shale play that is under Fort Worth and suburban and urban counties around Fort Worth and DFW Airport. If you fly into Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, you will see some drilling rigs, possibly, surrounding the runways, because there is a tremendous natural gas field under the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport and under the city of Fort Worth and all of the cities surrounding central Texas. And that has kicked this natural gas production into very high gear, if you will, and probably is the largest natural gas field in the lower 48 states. We produce in the Barnett Shale alone 1.7 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day from 5,477 wells. And those are drilling rigs that are going on in schoolyards, in backyards, on the airport, and of course that brings a different issue to the Railroad Commission as we oversee those permits, and that is the situation that's occurred when people are moving into, if you will, the energy patch of Texas and cohabitation with oil and gas production and living in neighborhoods and schools. But that is an example, that Barnett Shale is an example of a very, what we call, or is called, it's not anymore, an unconventional reservoir because of the type of rock, and that requires very expensive and unique technology to produce from. And for years it was deemed to be impermeable by geologists, but has really become commonplace to produce from now. And I think that the Barnett Shale is definitely part of the formula that has helped put the brakes on that slight decline in natural gas production. But even though the majority of the state's revenues don't come from this industry anymore, we do have, as I said, a much more diverse economy. We are still very rich and even more energy resources in this state. Taxes from the production of oil and gas raised $6 billion for the state of Texas in our state revenue and local taxes, $3.2 million from severance taxes on those barrels and every MCF of natural gas, as I was saying, go into our rainy day fund. And the payroll is not small change. It's not chump change in Texas, $33 billion in payroll for this industry, with over 264,000 jobs directly related to the production of oil and gas in this state. And then we also have state-owned lands, and the production on state-owned lands, which are very rich in hydrocarbons, goes into the Permanent School Fund, which assists in funding public education in Texas, and our Permanent University Fund. Is that my time to stop? Oh dear, that's my 1 minute. But we have many different incentives in the state of Texas. They're all applicable, though, just to our state severance tax credits for drilling in hard-to-get places and like tight sands and in the Barnett Shale. And so this state, I think, has looked at this policy, and we have deemed it to be very important to our state economy. And I think that we even might be able to be a microcosm, if you will, of the potential of this country, in fact. We regulate in an environmentally sound way the production of our domestic hydrocarbons. I have maintained, I have been guilty of writing and talking about the fact that I believe what we have in our own backyard is our victory garden. Until that time, in the coming years, we have transitioned to a new, basically, an economy that is built upon a new energy. What we did in the 30s and in the 40s and in World War I and World War II, it is said that America floated to victory, the Allies floated to victory in World War II on a sea of United States oil, and that was oil that came from the East Texas oil field right here, and we contributed greatly to that. And that field is in decline. And there are similar historic fields that are in decline as well. Advanced technology and these high prices are incentivizing new production from those fields and the availability of risk capital as well. But I believe that new technology is very, very important to the future and to how we are going to meet our energy needs. And I appreciate so much the conversation about demand management as well, conservation. And that is going to be a critical component to whatever we do to our toolbox. And I think that it is not talked about enough. It is something we have control over. I appreciate so much Austin Energy's what the proactive strides they are taking, and as a resident of Austin myself, and I always like to get out of the environs of the capital of Texas and come to Houston. But Texas, it is true, is the largest consumer of electricity in the country, and we have a lot of air conditioning, and Houston would not even be here were it not, I have heard, for the invention of air conditioning. And so, not to mention all of the other consumption that goes on across the state, and it's a pretty big state too. But demand management is something that we are going to have to take a look at. I had a few notes I had taken on some of the things that were being commented on, and I appreciated, Roger, you talked about the practicalities of the goals we set. It is not constructive, I believe, to set goals that are unreasonably high, because there are some people who just shut down and think that this is not a practical discussion and we can't even have it, and it drives people away from the discussion. And so I appreciated your comments about the practical goals that we need to set, because and they can be changed, and nothing should be set in stone, and that we should just stair-step up our goals for renewables and alternatives. But that also means that we need to stair-step down away from the use of petroleum. And I differentiate natural gas and petroleum. Oil, as you may or may not know, most of the products, over 50% of the petroleum that we use is not used in cars. It is used in products that we use every single day, and we're wearing it on our feet and in our clothes and in our handbags and everything we do, and it's in the roads we drive on. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as we contemplate what we're going to be displacing, and that, I believe, truly is our vehicular energy. And that is going to take a tremendous amount of pressure off the use of petroleum as we move into alternatives for vehicular use, because getting away from the products and the use of petroleum in products is going to take even longer. My time is up. I want to thank you all. I'm delighted to have been invited to participate. I guess if you're talking about oil and gas and you're in Houston, I like to think, and I hope you feel like you've learned something, and who better to talk about it than somebody who has been elected across the state of Texas to oversee this industry, which has been so important to our national security for all of us in this country. And hopefully we will find more and more, and we'll have a great dialogue for many years to come. Thank you so much.